Hello, boys and girls. When I was 12 years old, I actually was in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. It was very scary. I remember being 12 years old, sitting in my chair in my living room, talking on the phone, as most kids were doing at that time. We didn't have the internet and cell phones. This was a house phone. And I remember I had the World Series on. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, everything started to shake. And I ran to my doorway and I stood in the door frame because we were always told that the door frame was the safest part of the house to be in because it was the strongest, so that if anything fell, you were protected. I remember looking outside, and all I remember is the cars bouncing up and down off the ground. It was incredible and it was so scary. I didn't really know what to think at that time. I didn't know where any of my family were. I just remember standing there in pure shock. The shaking lasted for a long time. It was so long, in fact, that I didn't know if it was ever going to end. Now, it was only 30 seconds, but 30 seconds of violent shaking can seem like a lifetime. When the shaking stopped, I remember seeing my brother running down the street because he was actually at a friend's house. And my mom came out of the room, and my stepfather was a truck driver, so he wasn't home, so we didn't know what was going on with him. And my little brother was next door at our neighbor's house. As soon as I walked outside of my home to see kind of what was going on, I noticed that our chimney in our home was completely destroyed. It had a crack that went all the way up to the top. I remember looking back through my door and noticing that the kitchen was completely a mess. All of the dishes had fallen out of the cupboards. The picture frames fell off the walls. They were shattered all over the floor. Our furniture was moved all over the place. Things were broken, and you didn't really know what was going on at that point. And I just remember walking outside, and it was almost like there was a silence. I think everyone was in shock. But before you knew it, there was another earthquake. And earthquakes that come after a large earthquake are called aftershocks. They're usually smaller than the bigger earthquake, but they continue to happen. And in fact, these continued to happen for a couple of days. And it was very scary because every time, the ground would start to shake, you would think, oh no, this is happening again. We couldn't go back into our home because it was so destroyed inside. Our neighbors couldn't go back in their homes. Cars were flipped upside down. There were lots of homes that were in far worse shape than mine. So I remember that we came together as a community or as a neighborhood, and we all sat outside to try to figure out what to do next. We ended up living outside for 2 weeks. We had to live with barbecuing all of our food, and the only food we had was whatever we could salvage from our refrigerators and cook. We had to put things in ice chests. It was very scary to go back into the homes. It was not safe at all because you didn't know what damage had been done to the structure of the home. So sometimes when there's an earthquake and the damage to the home, the structure is bad, you may not see it from the outside, but if another earthquake happens, it could fall. So it's very dangerous to go back in. And the earthquakes, you don't know when they're coming. They just happen to happen, I guess, if you will. So I remember sitting outside and we ended up camping out there. I remember we made pizza on the barbecue. I thought that was the craziest thing ever. And I remember finding peace in one of the neighbor's daughter's voices. She was singing a song to kind of comfort all of us. It was a very scary time and we didn't really know what was going on. My mom didn't know where her husband was, and it took almost a day before they found him, which he was okay, thankfully. I remember there being stores like Target and Walmart and those kind of things. And things were so destroyed downtown that people could not go in to the stores. Um, one, because they were destroyed, but two, because the aftershocks were still happening. And if somebody was in a building not knowing if the aftershocks are going to be big or small, it was very dangerous. So what they did is they had lines, and they went for miles. Like, the people would stand in line, and they were allowed to get 10 items. They had to give the list of their 10 items to a worker. That worker would run in, grab their 10 items, and come out. It took days to get through that line. So if you needed batteries, you may have only been able to get one thing of batteries. So you had to really be thoughtful in how you were able to get things. So we really had to come together and be resourceful. We had to, depend on each other and really lean on each other at that time. This is a very, very scary time, and I'll never ever forget it. A lot of people will call it the San Francisco earthquake, but I lived in Santa Cruz. Actually, I lived in Capitola, which is right next to Santa Cruz. And the epicenter, which is the strongest part of the earthquake, was actually really, really close to where I lived, a lot closer than it was in San Francisco. But San Francisco is more well known, and people can identify with that. It also was on TV because of the World Series, and they had to stop the World Series because everything was shaking. Some very We have the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, and the Bay Bridge actually collapsed. So it's two levels, and one of the levels actually collapsed into the other level. So there's a lot of tragedy, a lot of sadness, a lot of things that happened um, during this time. So it's definitely a time I will never forget, and I hope to never have to go through that again. Although we have lots of earthquakes in California, not all of them are severe like this one was. But there are times when earthquakes can be very, very scary. So that was my account and my memories of the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. I hope you enjoyed my story.